The gavel's crack was the loudest sound I'd ever heard, echoing through the dusty, wood-paneled courtroom like a gunshot. It wasn't a fancy city courtroom, but the one in our small town of Oak Creek, where everyone knew everyone, and today, everyone was staring at me. Before we proceed with the reading of the will, the family lawyer, Mr. Davies, said, clearing his throat and looking uncomfortably at the packed room, "I'd like to acknowledge we have quite an audience. For those of you following along from afar, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And after you've heard this story, I want your honest opinion. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? We read every comment. Now, let's begin." He adjusted his glasses, the document in his hand trembling slightly. On my right sat my uncle, Frank, his wife Helen, and their 3 sons, my cousins. They were dressed in their Sunday best, their faces a mixture of grief and sharp, barely concealed anticipation. On my left, I sat alone. My jeans were faded, my boots were dusty from my morning shift at the local diner, and my hands still smelled faintly of grease and coffee. My great-uncle, Jedediah Jones, had been the town's eccentric, a recluse who lived out on the old Miller place, a sprawling, worn-down ranch that everyone said was more trouble than it was worth. He was my grandfather's brother, and the only one who ever seemed to have time for me after my parents passed. "The last will and testament of Jedediah Alistair Jones," Mr. Davies began, his voice formal. He read through the small bequests first. A pocket watch to Frank, a set of china to Helen, a few $1,000s to each of my cousins for their education. They accepted each item with solemn, satisfied nods. Then Mr. Davies paused, taking a sip of water. "And for the remainder of his estate, including the Miller Ranch, all its outbuildings, and all associated lands, totaling approximately 800 acres. Frank leaned forward slightly, a smug smile playing on his lips. He'd been managing what little business Uncle Jed had for years. He'd told everyone at the funeral that he'd be turning the useless scrubland into a proper cattle operation. I leave it in its entirety to my great-niece, Sarah Marie Evans. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the old clock ticking on the wall. Then, chaos erupted. "What?" Frank shot to his feet, his chair screeching backward. "That's impossible." "The girl? She's a waitress, for God's sake." Helen's face was a mask of outrage. "Mr. Davies, there must be some mistake. Jed would never. She barely knew him." My eldest cousin, Kyle, sneered. "What's she gonna do with it? Plant a bigger vegetable garden?" The gavel cracked again. "Order. Order in the court," the judge barked. Mr. Davies waited for the noise to die down, his eyes meeting mine. They held a strange mixture of pity and something else. Respect? "The document is legal and binding. Sarah is the sole inheritor." He handed me a single, weathered key and a thick envelope. My hands were shaking. The Miller Ranch, the useless land everyone mocked. It was mine. Frank cornered me on the courthouse steps, his face purple with rage. "You listen to me, girl. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. The taxes on that place are a fortune. The fences are falling down. The well's probably dry. You'll be bankrupt in 6 months. Be smart. Sign it over to me. I'll give you $50,000. You can get a decent car, maybe put a down payment on a trailer." His words were meant to sting, to shrink me back into the invisible, poor relation I'd always been. But holding that key, I felt a spark of the defiance Uncle Jed had always encouraged in me. "It's not for sale, Uncle Frank," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted, but firm. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "We'll see about that." The next few weeks were a trial by fire. Frank was right about one thing. The ranch was a mess. The farmhouse was dilapidated. The fields were overgrown, and the bank statements showed property taxes that made my diner salary look like pocket change. My family circled like vultures, waiting for me to fail. But I had Uncle Jed's envelope. Inside, I didn't find money or a secret stock portfolio. I found maps, dozens of them, hand-drawn, with specific points marked, and a single cryptic note in his messy scrawl. "The future isn't in the dirt, kid. It's in the wind. Trust the data. P.S. Check the storm cellar." The storm cellar was buried under years of rust and neglect. When I finally pried the doors open, I didn't find jars of preserves or old tools. I found filing cabinets. And in those cabinets I found 10 years of meteorological data, wind speed readings, and correspondence with the university engineering department. Uncle Jed hadn't been a crazy old hermit. He'd been a visionary. He'd spent the last decade of his life quietly proving that the Miller Ranch sat in one of the most consistently windy corridors in the state. He'd been planning a wind farm. The pieces clicked into place. The useless scrubland, the constant wind that everyone complained about. It was all a potential gold mine. A clean, renewable energy gold mine. I used my last savings to hire a consultant from the university Jed had been corresponding with. The report he gave me was staggering. The land wasn't just suitable for a wind farm. It was prime. It could power half the county. Armed with the data, I formed a company, Prairie Wind Power. I reached out to the same energy companies my uncle had, this time with proof. The offers started to trickle in. They were life-changing. Of course, Frank found out. He showed up at the ranch one afternoon, not with anger, but with a new, slick smile. He'd brought a man in an expensive suit. "Sarah, this is Mr. Thornton from Aegis Energy," Frank said, clapping me on the back like we were old pals. "They're prepared to make a very generous offer for the land. A real offer. You can be set for life." Mr. Thornton smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "We're prepared to offer $3 million. The number hung in the air, so large it felt unreal. I could pay off my debts, help my friends, leave Oak Creek, and never look back. I looked past them, at the rolling hills where the wind whipped through the tall grass, making it dance. I thought of Uncle Jed, out here with his anemometers and his dreams, being laughed at by the whole town. He hadn't left me this land to sell it. He'd left it to me to finish what he started. "I'm not selling," I said. Frank's smile vanished. "Don't be a fool. This is your one chance." "No," I said, my voice steady for the first time. "My chance is to build something, and I'm not building it with you, or for Aegis Energy." I turned to Mr. Thornton. "Thank you for the offer, but I've decided to develop the wind farm myself, in partnership with the local energy co-op. We're keeping it community-owned." The color drained from Frank's face. You can't do that. You don't have the capital. I'm just the owner," I finished for him. "And I've secured the funding." It was a bluff, but a confident one. The consultant had mentioned grants, green energy loans. I was learning to play the game. They left, sputtering threats about legal challenges, but the fight had gone out of them. They knew. The girl they thought was only good for pouring coffee had just outmaneuvered them. The real work began. It was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating. I learned about power purchase agreements, turbine specifications, and environmental impact studies. I fought with bureaucrats, convinced skeptical farmers to lease their land for the transmission lines, and worked with the co-op to structure the deal so the whole community would benefit. The day the first turbine was erected was a town holiday. Half of Oak Creek stood on my hill, watching as the massive white blades were hoisted into the sky. The local newspaper was there. The headline the next day read, "Waitress turns wind into wealth. Jones Heir powers up Oak Creek." As the turbine's blades began to turn, catching the relentless prairie wind, a soft hum filled the air. It was the sound of the future, my future. Frank and his family didn't come to the ceremony. But I saw him sometimes, driving past, staring up at the turbines with a look of bitter wonder. A year later, Prairie Wind Power is operational. The royalties are paying the town's school budget, creating scholarships, and fixing roads. I still live in the old farmhouse, but now it's restored, filled with light and the quiet, powerful hum of the turbines. This morning, a letter arrived. It was from Frank. His tone was formal, strained. He was writing on behalf of the family. They were wondering if I'd be interested in discussing a family investment opportunity in a new venture he was pursuing. I folded the letter and walked outside. The wind tugged at my hair, strong and constant. I looked up at the row of sleek white turbines, their blades spinning in perfect, powerful harmony against the vast blue sky. They were a monument to a crazy old man's dream and a forgotten girl's courage. I hadn't just inherited a piece of land. I'd inherited the wind, and I'd learned that the people who are most underestimated are often the ones with the power to change everything. The girl who served their coffee now owned the power that lit up their homes, and that was a truth sweeter than any revenge.